True Scary Stories. The Dark Secrets Behind Elmsworth's Quarantine. Chapter 1. Whispering Shadows. In the heart of a quaint little town, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, lay Elmsworth, a place where the sun's golden rays painted the streets in warmth and familiarity. The town was a tapestry of everyday life, filled with the laughter of children, the chatter of neighbors, and the hum of the community's collective spirit. However, on this fateful morning, a peculiar stillness loomed over Elmsworth, casting an unsettling shadow over its quaint charm. Michael Turner awoke to the usual sounds of his home. The soft rustle of the morning breeze slipping through the slightly ajar window, the distant call of birds greeting the dawn, and the comforting presence of his wife, Claire, as she prepared breakfast in the kitchen. He stretched and rubbed the sleep from his eyes, glancing over at the alarm clock blinking the time, 7 a.m. The school day awaited, filled with the promise of eager students and the thrill of sharing knowledge. Little did he know that today would be unlike any other. As Michael stepped into the kitchen, he found Claire moving about with her usual grace, a smile on her lips as she plated the pancakes. Their 8-year-old daughter, Lily, sat at the table, her legs swinging playfully beneath her chair, her hair a wild halo of curls. "Good morning, sweetie," he greeted, planting a kiss on her forehead. But as Michael looked at his family, a strange sense of unease began to gnaw at him, like a whisper in the back of his mind, urging him to pay attention. After a hurried breakfast, Michael grabbed his briefcase and kissed his family goodbye. The streets of Elmsworth were eerily quiet as he walked to school. He noticed a few neighbors peeking out from behind their curtains, their faces a mix of confusion and concern. It was as if an invisible shroud had descended upon the town, muffling sounds and dimming spirits. The vibrant colors of the morning seemed to fade into a dull gray, casting a pall over the cheerful facade of the community. As he approached Elmsworth High School, the unsettling silence deepened. Students milled about, their faces painted with bewilderment and anxiety. A group of teenagers stood in a huddle, whispering frantically, but when Michael reached them, he realized they were trying to speak, their mouths moving without sound. Their expressions were frantic, their hands gesturing wildly as they struggled to communicate. A chill ran down Michael's spine as he realized that something was terribly wrong. Inside the classroom, the atmosphere felt stifling. Michael's students shuffled in, their faces pale and their eyes wide with fear. He greeted them, but to his horror, the room was filled with an oppressive silence. He tried to teach, but his voice echoed back to him, swallowed by the void. Frustration bubbled inside him as he watched his students' expressions shift from confusion to panic. They grasped at their throats, as if trying to summon the words that refused to come. "Everyone calm down," he urged, waving his hands to get their attention. But instead of reassurance, his movements only heightened their anxiety. A few students began to cry silently, their faces crumpling in distress as they realized they could no longer articulate their fears. Michael's heart raced as the weight of the situation pressed down on him. The eerie silence enveloped the classroom like a thick fog, stifling not just sound but hope itself. He turned to the window, hoping for a glimpse of the world outside to offer clarity, but the streets of Elmsworth appeared deserted. The vibrant community that once thrived on laughter and chatter now lay frozen in a haunting stillness. People wandered the sidewalks, their eyes wide and uncomprehending, their hands gesturing wildly, searching for some semblance of connection in a world stripped of its most fundamental tool, speech. As the minutes ticked by, dread settled in Michael's gut. This was not just a bizarre occurrence. It was a phenomenon that threatened to unravel the very fabric of their lives. He knew he had to act quickly. Gathering his thoughts, he gestured for his students to follow him, leading them outside into the open air, where the sun hung high in the sky, seemingly oblivious to the turmoil brewing below. Outside, the chaos had intensified. A mother clutched her child, desperately trying to calm the little girl who screamed soundlessly, her mouth wide open in a futile attempt to voice her fear. A group of men stood in the center of the square, their faces taut with worry as they attempted to shout for help, their voices lost to the void. The atmosphere pulsed with an undercurrent of panic, the unspoken fears palpable in the air. Michael felt a surge of determination rising within him. He could not let fear paralyze him or his students. With newfound resolve, he began to gesture wildly, urging everyone to gather and focus. He pointed to the town hall, where a group of officials had gathered, their expressions grave. Perhaps they could provide answers, perhaps they had a plan. But as he rallied his students and fellow townsfolk, an unsettling thought crossed his mind. What if this silence was more than just an inexplicable phenomenon? What if it was a harbinger of something far more sinister, lurking just beneath the surface of their peaceful existence? As they made their way through the streets, a shiver ran down Michael's spine, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the quietness was a warning, an ominous prelude to a dark revelation waiting to be unveiled. In that moment, standing amid the chaos, Michael Turner vowed to uncover the truth behind the whispers of silence, no matter the cost. Elmsworth would not remain a ghost town, trapped in its own silence. The struggle for their voices had just begun. Chapter 2: Echoes of Silence. The atmosphere in Elmsworth had shifted dramatically since the morning. What had started as a strange and unsettling phenomenon had morphed into a full-blown crisis. Michael Turner felt the weight of despair pressing down on him as he stepped out of the school with a small group of students, their faces still etched with confusion and fear. The silence that enveloped the town was suffocating, a relentless reminder of their lost voices and growing anxiety. As they moved through the streets, Michael's mind raced. He had always been a man of logic and reason, but the current situation defied all rational explanation. He needed answers, quickly. His thoughts drifted to his family. He desperately wanted to reach Claire and Lily to ensure they were safe. But with every attempt to communicate, the frustration mounted as he realized he could not even call out to them. How could he reassure them when the words he so desperately wanted to convey slipped through his fingers like sand? Determined to find clarity amidst the chaos, Michael made his way to the town square. Residents wandered aimlessly, their faces a canvas of anxiety. The usual sounds of life, the chatter of children playing, the hum of conversations, had been replaced by an eerie stillness, interrupted only by the occasional muffled sob. He caught sight of a few familiar faces, neighbors who had shared laughter and camaraderie, but now they seemed like shadows of their former selves, lost in a world devoid of sound. In the distance, a figure caught his attention. A woman stood with a notebook in hand, her brow furrowed in concentration. Michael recognized her as Jessica Harper, a local journalist known for her tenacity and unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth. She had a knack for getting to the heart of matters, often exposing the hidden layers of complexity within their small town. Intrigued, Michael approached her, hoping she could provide insight into the mysterious phenomenon gripping Elmsworth. "Jessica," he tried to call out, but the sound of his own voice was nothing more than a breath against the silence. Frustrated, he waved his arms, hoping to catch her attention. She turned, her eyes widening as she saw him. He gestured toward the crowd, indicating the confusion and despair surrounding them. Jessica immediately understood the urgency in his expression. Without a word, she joined him, and together they ventured deeper into the heart of the town, observing the frantic movements of their neighbors. The air was thick with tension, each individual trying to communicate their fears through frantic gestures. It was a surreal sight, one that left Michael with an overwhelming sense of helplessness. He felt an unspoken bond forming between himself and Jessica as they silently acknowledged the weight of their predicament. "Michael," Jessica finally broke the silence, her voice a mere whisper. "This isn't just an ordinary occurrence. I can feel it. There's something dark lurking beneath the surface." Her words sent a shiver down his spine. "You think there's more to this?" he asked, his heart racing with the possibilities. Jessica nodded, her gaze steely with determination. "Absolutely. I've been doing some digging into the town's records, and I've stumbled upon some strange connections between the local government and a corporation that has been operating in the shadows. It's almost as if they're hiding something." She paused, her eyes scanning the area for any eavesdroppers. We need to investigate further. Michael felt a surge of hope. With Jessica's investigative skills and his determination to protect his family and community, perhaps they could uncover the truth behind this baffling phenomenon. "Where do we start?" he asked, eager to take action. Jessica pointed toward the town hall, where officials had gathered in a flurry of whispers and hushed conversations. They might have answers, or at least we can observe how they're handling the situation. But we need to be careful. If there is a conspiracy at play, they might not take kindly to our questions. Michael nodded, his resolve solidifying. "We need to find a way to communicate with my family. I have to make sure Claire and Lily are safe." As they approached the town hall, the atmosphere thickened with a sense of foreboding. The building, usually bustling with activity, now stood silent and ominous, its walls seeming to absorb the tension in the air. They peered through the windows, straining to catch a glimpse of the officials inside. Shadows moved behind the glass, and the flicker of anxious expressions hinted at the growing fear among the town leaders. "Do you see that?" Jessica whispered, pointing to a group of men huddled together, their body language tense. "They look like they're discussing something serious. We need to listen in." Michael's heart raced at the thought. It felt like they were crossing an invisible line into dangerous territory, but the stakes were too high to back down now. He nodded in agreement, and together they crept closer to the building, careful not to attract attention. As they positioned themselves against the wall, straining to hear the muffled conversation within, Michael felt a pang of longing for his family. He could only hope that Claire and Lily were safe, that they were not caught up in the panic that had gripped the town. But there was little time for distractions. If there was indeed a conspiracy at play, they had to uncover the truth before it was too late. "We can't let fear dictate our actions," Jessica murmured, her eyes focused intently on the shadows beyond the glass. "This silence is a weapon, and we need to find a way to break it. If we can expose what's happening here, maybe we can restore our voices and our lives." With newfound determination, Michael realized they were at the precipice of something much larger than themselves. What had started as a simple investigation into the unexplained loss of their voices had transformed into a quest for truth, a quest that might unravel secrets buried deep within the heart of Elmsworth. As they huddled against the cool stone of the town hall, the echoes of silence surrounded them. But Michael knew one thing for certain: they would not remain voiceless for long. Together, they would fight to reclaim their voices and, in doing so, reclaim their lives. Chapter 3: The Unseen Hand. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Elmsworth. The once vibrant town was now shrouded in a heavy cloak of unease, and the chilling silence persisted. As night fell, Michael and Jessica found themselves lurking in the darkness outside the town hall, straining to listen to the muffled conversations within. The flickering lights cast eerie patterns on the walls, and the weight of uncertainty hung heavily in the air. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed against the pavement, drawing their attention. A group of local officials emerged, their faces pale and drawn, eyes darting nervously as they whispered among themselves. Among them was Mayor Thompson, a man known for his charismatic demeanor, now appearing flustered and ill at ease. He had always portrayed an image of confidence, but tonight, the cracks in his facade were evident. "What do you think they're discussing?" Michael asked, glancing at Jessica, who was watching intently. "I have a feeling it's about how to contain this situation," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're probably trying to downplay the panic, but it seems like they're just making things worse." As they observed the officials, Michael noticed two additional figures lurking in the background, clad in sharp suits, representatives from a corporation known as Helix Innovations. He recognized them from town meetings. Their presence had always been somewhat disconcerting. They had pushed for various local projects, often under the guise of community benefit, but there had always been an air of secrecy surrounding their operations. "What do you think they want?" Michael pondered, frowning as he watched the men whisper to Mayor Thompson, who nodded vigorously. The body language was telling. It was as if the mayor was seeking approval from the corporate representatives rather than listening to the needs of the townsfolk. "I don't like this. We need to dig deeper," Jessica urged, her determination unwavering. Let's see if we can find any documents or records that link the town to Helix Innovations. They might be hiding something important." Michael nodded, feeling a sense of urgency course through him. They slipped away from the town hall, navigating the narrow streets toward the local library. It had always been a quiet place, filled with dusty shelves and the scent of aged paper. But tonight, it became their sanctuary, a place where they could seek answers without the watchful eyes of the officials. Once inside, the atmosphere shifted. The silence felt more profound here, almost tangible. They made their way to the archives, where old newspapers and town records were stored. Michael scanned the rows of dusty boxes, searching for anything that might shed light on the recent events. As they rifled through the files, Jessica's fingers brushed against a stack of documents labeled town contracts. She pulled them out and began to sift through the pages, her eyes narrowing with every passing second. "Look at this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are multiple contracts here between the town and Helix Innovations." Michael leaned closer, peering at the papers. The contracts were vague, filled with legal jargon that obscured the true nature of the agreements. However, a few keywords stood out: experimental project, community benefit, and confidentiality clause. The deeper they dug, the more unsettling it became. Experimental project? Michael echoed, a chill creeping up his spine. What kind of experiment could possibly involve the entire town? "I don't know, but it seems like this was all planned," Jessica replied, her brow furrowing. "They must have conducted tests without informing the residents." This silence, it might be a side effect of whatever they were doing. As they continued to read, a sense of dread enveloped them. The contracts hinted at a larger agenda, a conspiracy that involved the very fabric of their community. The mention of government involvement only heightened their fears. It was becoming increasingly clear that the local authorities were not simply dismissing the residents' concerns. They were complicit in something far more sinister. Suddenly, Jessica's eyes widened as she stumbled upon a newspaper article that caught her attention. "Michael, look at this," she exclaimed, thrusting the page toward him. The headline read, "Helix Innovations, Pioneer in Groundbreaking Scientific Research." Below the headline was a photograph of the corporation's sleek headquarters, a stark contrast to the dilapidated state of Elmsworth. The article praised the company for its contributions to various fields, but something about the glowing report felt disingenuous. What's more troubling is that the company has been linked to controversial experiments across the country, Jessica continued, her voice laced with urgency. They were involved in projects that faced allegations of unethical practices. This is not just a random coincidence. Michael's heart sank as the implications sank in. We're not just dealing with a missing voice problem. We're caught in the crosshairs of a corporate agenda that seeks to silence the very people they claim to help. The silence of the town took on a new meaning, a chilling reminder of the unseen hand that orchestrated their plight. The deeper they delved, the clearer it became that Helix Innovations had a vested interest in keeping the residents of Elmsworth voiceless. If they succeeded in their efforts to cover up whatever was happening, the truth might never emerge. "Let's get this information out there," Michael urged, his resolve hardening. "We need to inform the townsfolk before it's too late. If they realize what's really going on, we might stand a chance against this conspiracy." Jessica nodded, her expression fierce with determination. "I agree, but we need to be careful. If we draw attention to ourselves, we could become targets." With their hearts pounding, they made their way back to the entrance of the library, clutching the evidence that could unravel the sinister plans of the unseen forces at play. The shadows of the town whispered their secrets, and they could feel the weight of history pressing down upon them. As they stepped back into the night, Michael felt a shift within himself. The uncertainty of their situation loomed large, but they were no longer mere spectators caught in a nightmare. They had uncovered a thread that, if pulled, could unravel the entire fabric of deceit woven around them. And together, they would bring light to the darkness, determined to reclaim their voices and expose the truth hidden beneath the surface of silence. Chapter 4: A Disturbing Revelation. The following day dawned with an eerie calmness that settled over Elmsworth. The sun cast a pale light across the streets, but the usual bustle of activity was conspicuously absent. It was as if the town had collectively held its breath, waiting for something to shatter the silence. Michael felt a sense of urgency coursing through him as he met Jessica at the local diner, the only establishment still open amidst the chaos. "Did you find anything else last night?" she asked, her eyes scanning the empty diner as if searching for hidden secrets. Michael nodded, a sense of gravity etched on his face. "I think I may have stumbled upon something significant. I remembered hearing rumors about an old warehouse on the outskirts of town that used to belong to Helix Innovations. I want to check it out." "Let's go then. The sooner we uncover the truth, the better," Jessica replied, her determination evident. With a sense of purpose, they set off toward the abandoned warehouse, each step resonating with the knowledge of the hidden horrors that might await them. As they approached the decaying structure, a shiver of anticipation washed over Michael. The once grand building now stood in dilapidation, its windows boarded up, and graffiti sprawled across the walls like a cry for help. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the remnants of forgotten machinery. Shadows danced along the walls, and the sound of their footsteps echoed ominously. The dim light filtering through the cracks revealed the remnants of what had once been a bustling center of innovation, now reduced to an unsettling tomb of past ambitions. Michael and Jessica stepped cautiously into the main area, their breaths hitching as they took in the scene. Rusting equipment lay scattered about, tangled wires snaked across the floor, and faded charts plastered the walls, detailing obscure experiments that had long since been abandoned. It was a disturbing sight, one that hinted at dark practices that had taken place within these walls. "Look at this," Jessica said, pointing to a large bulletin board covered in yellowed papers. As they approached, the chilling words began to materialize before them. Experiment 42, Behavioral Modulation Study. The more they read, the more alarm bells rang in Michael's mind. The project involved manipulating human behavior through a series of psychological and physiological tests. The ramifications were horrifying. "This can't be real," Michael muttered, his heart racing. "They were experimenting on people. What if some of our neighbors were involved?" Suddenly, a noise from the shadows made them jump. A figure emerged, hesitantly stepping into the light. It was a man in a lab coat, his face drawn and weary, eyes darting around as if he feared being seen. "You shouldn't be here," he warned, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Who are you?" Jessica demanded, taking a step closer. "What do you know about this place?" "My name is Dr. Peter Hall. I used to work here," he replied, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "But I left when I realized what they were doing. This was supposed to be research to help people, but it quickly turned into something else, something sinister." "Sinister how?" Michael pressed, desperation seeping into his voice. "What exactly did you see?" Dr. Hall hesitated, the weight of his past heavy upon him. They were conducting trials on residents without their consent. They called it a community health initiative, but it was all a cover for their real experiments. They used people as subjects for their behavioral modification tests, promising them better health in exchange for their participation. Michael's stomach churned at the thought. "So, you're saying people we know could have been part of this?" "Yes," Dr. Hall replied, his voice trembling. "They lured people in with the promise of free health care, but many never realized they were being monitored and tested. I didn't know the extent of it until it was too late. Once I uncovered the truth, I had to leave. I didn't want to be a part of it anymore." Jessica's eyes narrowed as she processed the implications. "Is there any way to find out who was involved?" Dr. Hall looked conflicted, his brow furrowed with the burden of his knowledge. "I have some records, but they're incomplete. The higher-ups have been scrubbing the files to hide their tracks. If you're determined to find out the truth, I can show you what I have, but you need to be careful. They don't want anyone digging too deep." "Whatever it takes," Michael replied, resolute. "We have to expose them. This town deserves to know the truth." Dr. Hall led them deeper into the warehouse, where he produced a battered folder filled with discolored papers and faded photographs. As they sifted through the documents, Michael felt a sense of dread settle in his bones. Each page was a testament to the dark experiments conducted in the shadows. Haphazard notes, sketches of human anatomy, and reports of behavioral changes in participants. "This is more than just unethical," Jessica said, her voice trembling with anger. "This is criminal." "Precisely," Dr. Hall affirmed, his expression grim. "And I fear that if we don't act soon, there may be more experiments in the future, possibly on a larger scale." As they dug through the findings, a photograph caught Michael's eye. It showed a gathering of townspeople, all smiles and laughter at a community event. Beneath the picture was a caption, "Elmsworth Health Initiative, building a better community." But as he looked closer, he recognized several familiar faces among the crowd. Friends, neighbors, even some of his own family members. The revelation hit him like a punch to the gut. These individuals had unknowingly become part of something far more sinister than they could have ever imagined. "We need to warn them," Michael said, urgency surging within him. "They need to understand what they might have been exposed to." Jessica nodded, determination flaring in her eyes. "But we need proof. We have to gather more evidence before we confront the town or the officials. Otherwise, we'll be dismissed as conspiracy theorists." "Let's keep searching," Michael suggested, the adrenaline propelling him forward. "We have to find anything that links Helix Innovations to the local government or the experiments." They worked quickly, gathering what they could, their hearts racing as they pieced together the fragments of a dark puzzle. The deeper they delved, the more twisted the story became. As they uncovered disturbing evidence of the trials, a sense of dread settled over them, wrapping around their hearts like a vice. Before long, they had compiled a small mountain of evidence that could expose the truth. Yet, with every revelation, a looming dread gnawed at Michael's mind. They were not just uncovering a conspiracy. They were stepping into a dangerous game, one where the stakes were higher than they could imagine. As they exited the warehouse, the weight of their findings felt almost unbearable. The silence of Elmsworth was no longer just the absence of sound. It was a silence steeped in dread, a void that whispered of the unseen hand controlling their lives. They had uncovered the truth, but the question remained. Would anyone believe them before it was too late? Chapter 5. The Collective Silence. The days that followed their unsettling discovery weighed heavily on the town of Elmsworth. What had begun as an unsettling phenomenon, people losing their voices, was morphing into something far darker. The once vibrant streets, filled with laughter and chatter, now lay shrouded in a pervasive quiet that seeped into the very essence of daily life. Michael Turner found himself engulfed by an overwhelming emotional burden. As a teacher, he had always prided himself on his ability to connect with his students, to guide them through their struggles with understanding and compassion. But now, the silence in his classroom felt suffocating. The absence of voices was not merely a lack of sound. It was a palpable absence of joy, of interaction, and of community. On that particular day, he watched as his students fidgeted in their seats, eyes wide with confusion and fear. The absence of communication had resulted in a profound psychological toll. Many had retreated into themselves, their spirits dulled by the constant uncertainty. The once lively discussions about literature and history had devolved into awkward glances and silent gestures. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the day, Michael felt the weight of despair pressing down on him like an anchor, holding him beneath the surface of a turbulent sea. Home, too, had transformed into a space of strained silence. The family dinner table, once filled with lively banter and shared stories, now stood as a stark reminder of their disconnection. Michael glanced at his wife, Sarah, who sat across from him, her brow furrowed in worry. Their daughter, Lily, clutched her doll tightly, her big eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Dad," Lily finally mouthed, her voice lost in the void. "What's happening?" Michael felt his heart break at her silent plea. "I don't know, sweetheart," he replied, even though he felt an overwhelming need to reassure her. "But we'll figure this out together. I promise." The strain of communication breakdowns began to manifest in ways that were hard to ignore. Sarah often paced the house, her worry transforming into frustration as she struggled to express her thoughts and emotions. The once tight-knit family now felt like a collection of individuals adrift in a sea of confusion. They attempted to communicate through notes and gestures, but the nuances of conversation were lost in translation, leaving them feeling more isolated than ever. Michael often found himself reminiscing about happier times, moments that felt like distant dreams, now overshadowed by despair. He remembered the picnic they had at Maple Park last summer, the sun glistening off the lake as they laughed and played. He could still hear Lily's infectious laughter echoing in his ears, the way she would run toward the water, arms outstretched, as if she could fly. He missed the comfort of shared laughter and the warmth of familial connection. Those memories clashed violently with the current reality of silence and uncertainty. Every time he tried to bring up those happy moments to his family, the words lodged in his throat, heavy and unspoken. The silence wasn't just external, it invaded his mind, stirring up anxiety and dread. As the week progressed, the atmosphere in Elmsworth grew increasingly tense. The townspeople, once friendly and engaged, began to withdraw into their own shells. There were murmurs of anger and suspicion, and without the ability to communicate openly, misunderstandings flourished. Rumors spread like wildfire, feeding on the growing fear and uncertainty. Neighbors who had shared cups of coffee just days ago were now exchanging glances laced with hostility. Michael witnessed this escalating tension firsthand during a town meeting called to address the crisis. Residents filled the community center, the air thick with palpable anxiety. The mayor, a once charismatic leader, stood at the front, attempting to maintain a semblance of order amidst the chaos. "We will figure this out together," he shouted, his voice filled with desperation, but the words echoed hollow against the backdrop of silence. Some residents erupted with frustration, waving their arms in animated gestures, trying to make their points understood. Others shouted unintelligibly, their voices rising in a cacophony of chaos. Without the ability to articulate their thoughts, the townspeople began to fracture, splitting into factions that blamed each other for their predicament. Michael watched as a few neighbors exchanged accusatory glances, their body language brimming with distrust. He felt an urge to stand up and speak, to offer words of solace, but the futility of the situation stifled him. Instead, he exchanged worried looks with Jessica, who had joined them at the meeting, her expression mirroring his concern. They both knew that the deeper the divisions grew, the harder it would be to unite the town against the looming threat. As the meeting drew to a close, Michael glanced around the room, taking in the faces of the townspeople. He recognized the fear in their eyes, a reflection of his own turmoil. They were all trapped in the same nightmare, and yet they were losing each other to the silence that had come to define their existence. That night, as Michael lay in bed, his mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. He was haunted by the faces of his neighbors, by the weight of their collective silence, and by the knowledge that something sinister lurked just beneath the surface of their seemingly tranquil town. The once warm and inviting streets of Elmsworth had become a battleground of confusion and despair. With a heavy heart, he realized that their struggle wasn't merely against a loss of voice, but against the very essence of who they were as a community. As he stared into the darkness, he made a silent vow to fight for his family, his neighbors, and the town he loved. He would not let the silence consume them. Tomorrow, they would search for answers together, because if they didn't, they risked losing not just their voices, but their very identities. Chapter 6: Secrets of the Past. As the oppressive silence continued to envelop Elmsworth, Jessica and Michael embarked on a relentless pursuit of answers. They gathered in the dimly lit back room of Jessica's office, cluttered with papers, old newspaper clippings, and maps of the town. The atmosphere buzzed with an urgency fueled by their shared determination to uncover the truth behind the unsettling events that had shaken their lives. "Look at this," Jessica said, spreading an old newspaper article across the table. The yellowed edges crinkled under her fingers as she pointed to the headline: "Mysterious Disappearances Linked to Local Research Facility." The article detailed a series of bizarre incidents that had occurred decades earlier. Residents who had vanished without a trace, rumors of clandestine government activities, and whispers of scientific experiments that had long been forgotten. Michael leaned closer, his heart racing as he read the words. The article described a time when Elmsworth was home to a government-funded research facility known for its controversial experiments on human subjects. The facility had been shuttered following public outcry and numerous allegations of unethical practices, but it appeared the memories had not faded. Echoes of the past were clawing their way back into the present. What if this is connected? Michael mused, his brow furrowing as he connected the dots. What if the silence we're experiencing is a result of something that happened back then? Jessica nodded, her expression serious. It would explain why the town's authorities seem so dismissive. They don't want to bring back those memories, especially if there's a chance they're repeating history. Their investigation intensified as they sought out former residents of Elmsworth. Through a series of interviews, they began to piece together a troubling narrative. Many older townsfolk recounted eerie tales of secretive meetings held in the dark corners of the town, where whispers of government involvement loomed large. Some spoke of experiments conducted under the guise of medical advancement, where people were promised miracles but were instead subjected to horrors that haunted them for years. One elderly man, Mr. Thompson, had lived through the tumultuous time when the facility was active. His hands trembled as he recounted his memories, eyes clouded with the weight of the past. They told us it was for our own good, but we didn't know what we were signing up for, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. People just disappeared. Some said it was because they talked too much. I lost friends, neighbors. It was like they'd never existed. Michael's resolve hardened as he listened to Mr. Thompson's account. The thought that the current silence could be the resurgence of those buried horrors sent shivers down his spine. What happened back then must be connected to what's happening now. If they were experimenting on people, it's possible they're doing it again. As they continued their research, Michael's determination to protect his family only intensified. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were caught in the crosshairs of a sinister agenda that had been set in motion long before their time. The memories of the past seemed to echo through the present, warning them of the dangers lurking just beneath the surface. That evening, as Michael sat on the porch of his home, he gazed at the empty street, pondering the weight of their findings. The night air was thick with tension, and the once familiar sounds of Elmsworth had been replaced with an eerie stillness that seemed to taunt him. Sarah joined him, her presence a comforting balm against the growing dread. "What's on your mind?" she asked softly, concern etched across her face. Michael hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I think we might be facing something far more dangerous than just losing our voices. There's a history here, one that we're only beginning to understand. I need to make sure you and Lily are safe." Sarah nodded, her eyes reflecting the fear that had settled into their lives. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. We can't let this silence define us." With her words ringing in his ears, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were not merely passive victims in this story. They were active participants in a battle for their voices and their lives. As the darkness deepened around them, the couple made a silent pact to uncover the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. They would dig deeper, unveiling the secrets of Elmsworth's past to protect their family and community from the specters of history that threatened to consume them once more. Tomorrow, they would venture into the heart of the town's forgotten past, determined to unearth the dark truths that had long been buried beneath the surface. They knew that the echoes of silence were not just remnants of a lost voice. They were the whispers of a haunting legacy that demanded to be heard. Chapter 7. The Conspiracy Tightens. The darkness of the town of Elmsworth deepened not just in the physical sense, but also in the atmosphere that hung heavily over its residents. Michael and Jessica found themselves caught in a web of growing threats as they pressed deeper into their investigation. The quiet whispers of conspiracy that had initially intrigued them were now echoing like gunshots in the stillness of night. It began with subtle warnings. A few days after their last meeting with Mr. Thompson, Michael received a menacing note slipped beneath his front door. The words scrawled hastily in red ink, "Stop digging or you'll regret it." The message sent chills down his spine, igniting an urgent need to act quickly. He showed the note to Jessica, who furrowed her brow in concern. "We're on to something important," she said, her voice low and serious. "They don't want us to find out the truth." The air was thick with tension as the two of them strategized their next move. Michael felt the weight of responsibility bearing down on him, not just for himself, but for his family and the community that had once felt safe. Now that sense of security was fading, replaced by paranoia that crept into their daily lives. Each unfamiliar car that passed by, each shadow that moved too quickly, set their hearts racing. Their next confrontation came sooner than expected. At the local diner, a gathering spot for many townsfolk, Michael overheard a hushed conversation between two officials. They were speaking in low tones, casting furtive glances around the room. Michael caught snippets of their discussion. Words like investigation, corporation, and handle it sent his mind racing. As he approached their table, Jessica by his side, the officials turned to face them. One of them, a man with sharp features and an air of authority, cleared his throat. "You're looking for answers, Turner?" he asked, a smirk playing on his lips. "I suggest you leave well enough alone. You're meddling in things beyond your understanding." Michael felt the air thicken as he struggled to maintain his composure. "People are suffering, and you're just going to sit there and do nothing?" he shot back, anger bubbling beneath the surface. The man's expression hardened. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. You'd be wise to keep your nose out of this." As they walked away, Jessica's voice trembled with anger. "Who do they think they are? This is our town. We have a right to know what's going on." Yet as they stepped outside, a chill swept through the air. A sleek black car with tinted windows idled across the street, the driver's silhouette barely visible. Michael felt a shiver of dread crawl up his spine. They were being watched. The next few days unfolded in a blur of close calls. During one of their visits to the library to delve deeper into the town's history, they spotted a figure lurking in the shadows, an unfamiliar man who seemed to take a keen interest in their every move. Each time they turned to confront him, he would slip away, leaving them unsettled and on edge. During a late-night brainstorming session in Jessica's office, the tension reached a boiling point. They pored over documents, trying to connect the threads of the conspiracy, when the door suddenly swung open. Michael's heart raced as the man from the diner entered, flanked by two imposing figures. "Thought you could keep poking around without consequences?" the man sneered. "You're both making a grave mistake." Jessica stood her ground, her chin tilted defiantly. "We're not afraid of you. We're going to uncover the truth, no matter what." For a moment, a heavy silence filled the room, thick with intimidation. The man's gaze flickered with uncertainty. "You should be afraid. The past has a way of coming back to haunt those who disturb it." Just as the confrontation escalated, a loud crash echoed from the street outside, diverting their attention. Michael quickly seized the moment, ushering Jessica toward the back exit. "We need to get out of here. Now!" They barely escaped the office, hearts pounding as they dashed down the alley. Behind them, the echo of their pursuers grew fainter, but the threat lingered in the air like smoke. As they regrouped at Michael's home later that night, they realized the paranoia had seeped into the community. The silent suffering of their neighbors was now tinged with mistrust. Whispers in the dark and furtive glances at the grocery store only amplified their anxiety. Who could they confide in? Who among them had been silenced by the invisible hand of the conspiracy? Sarah noticed the change in Michael as he paced the living room, consumed by thoughts of danger and dread. "You're worrying too much," she said gently. "You can't carry this weight alone." He stopped, searching her eyes. "I'm trying to protect you and Lily, but I can't shake the feeling that we're being watched. What if they come for us next?" Her hand clasped his reassuringly. "We'll face it together. We're stronger as a family." Michael wanted to believe her words, but doubt gnawed at him. The conspiracy was tightening its grip, and as the walls closed in, he feared the day would come when they would have to fight back. Not just for their own voices, but for the community that had fallen silent under the weight of secrecy and manipulation. The stage was set for a confrontation unlike anything Elmsworth had ever seen. The truth was out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to be unearthed. And with each passing day, Michael felt the urgency grow. They had to act quickly before the conspiracy tightened its noose, silencing them all forever. Chapter 8. the final countdown. The time had come for the people of Elmsworth to reclaim their voices, a symbol of their autonomy and determination. Michael and Jessica stood at the forefront of a growing movement, fueled by the shared resolve of residents who had grown tired of living in fear. In hushed tones and secret meetings, they began to forge a plan to confront the corporation that had turned their once vibrant community into a shell of its former self. It was a chilly evening when they gathered in the basement of the old community center, a place once filled with laughter and life. The air was thick with anticipation, each resident's face illuminated by the flickering glow of the overhead lights. They formed a circle, a coalition of warriors ready to fight for their town. Michael scanned the crowd, noting familiar faces, neighbors, friends, and even a few former skeptics who had come to understand the depth of the conspiracy surrounding them. Jessica stood at the forefront, her voice steady and filled with purpose. "We can't let the fear paralyze us any longer," she began. "This isn't just about our voices. It's about our right to live freely. We have to stand together and demand answers." The room filled with murmurs of agreement, a ripple of solidarity spreading among the residents. One by one, they shared their experiences, recounting stories of silence that had invaded their lives. A woman named Grace spoke up, her voice trembling with emotion. "I haven't heard my children laugh in weeks. They're scared to speak, scared to ask questions. I refuse to let them grow up in a world where they feel they have to be silent." Her words ignited a fire within the group, pushing them closer to the brink of action. Michael felt a surge of determination as he realized how far they had come. This wasn't just a small band of individuals. It was a united front ready to expose the darkness lurking beneath the surface of their town. "We need a strategic plan," he urged. "We can't just charge into this without preparation. We need to know exactly what we're up against." Together, they outlined their approach. A public meeting was scheduled for the following week, a gathering that would bring together both the residents and the local officials, those who had turned a blind eye to the suffering in their midst. It would be the perfect opportunity to confront the corporation and shine a light on the truth that had remained hidden for far too long. As they discussed logistics, a sense of camaraderie blossomed in the basement. They shared laughter and light moments, bonding over their shared struggles. For the first time in weeks, Michael felt a glimmer of hope pierce through the oppressive atmosphere that had enveloped the town. However, as they continued to strategize, an undercurrent of tension threaded through their discussions. Each member was acutely aware of the danger that loomed ahead. The corporation would not sit idle while they tried to expose the truth. Michael could see the worry etched on some faces, the anxiety simmering just beneath the surface. A young man named Tom, known for his outgoing nature, voiced his concerns. "What if they retaliate? What if they try to silence us again?" His words hung heavy in the air, eliciting a wave of uneasy nods from the group. Michael leaned in closer, his expression firm. "We can't allow fear to control us. This is our chance to stand up for our community. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone in Elmsworth who feels voiceless." With that, the residents began to brainstorm ways to ensure their voices would be heard loud and clear. They considered bringing in allies, local activists, and anyone who had faced injustice in the past. Together, they could amplify their message, gathering enough momentum to force the corporation into a corner. As the meeting progressed, they formed a timeline for their plan. Michael would lead the charge, gathering evidence and testimonies from residents, while Jessica would contact local media outlets to cover the event. They would create pamphlets to distribute throughout the town, raising awareness and rallying support. The call for unity echoed through the community, forging an unbreakable bond among those present. Yet, as excitement mounted, Michael couldn't shake the feeling of impending danger. The corporation wouldn't take this lying down. A sense of urgency lingered in the back of his mind, nagging at him like a dark cloud. They had to act swiftly before their moment of opportunity slipped through their fingers. That night, as he returned home, Michael's thoughts raced. The plan was in motion, but what if it wasn't enough? He looked at his family, finding solace in their presence. Lily sat on the living room floor, drawing with bright colors, blissfully unaware of the turmoil surrounding them. He wanted to protect her innocence, to shield her from the reality that threatened to engulf their lives. As he lay in bed, Michael replayed the day's events in his mind. A surge of adrenaline coursed through him. He couldn't afford to let fear dictate his actions any longer. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but it would also bring an opportunity for change. In the days leading up to the meeting, the tension in the town intensified. Rumors began to circulate about their plans, and whispers of dissent crept into conversations. The corporation was already mobilizing, sending representatives to ensure their grip on the community remained intact. Michael felt the urgency rising, aware that time was running out. On the eve of the meeting, a storm raged outside, mirroring the turmoil within his heart. As the wind howled and rain lashed against the windows, he gathered his family together. "We're about to embark on something monumental," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. "Whatever happens tomorrow, know that we're doing this for each other. We're fighting for our right to be heard." Lily looked up at him with wide eyes, her innocent trust shining through. "Will we win, Daddy?" she asked, her small voice barely audible above the storm. Michael knelt down beside her, brushing her hair back gently. "We will try our hardest, sweetheart, and no matter what happens, we will face it together." In that moment, he realized that their fight was more than just about reclaiming their voices. It was about restoring hope and unity to a community that had been silenced for far too long. The storm outside could not diminish the strength they found in each other, nor could it drown out the resolve that was now echoing in the hearts of the residents of Elmsworth. The final countdown had begun, and Michael felt an unshakable sense of purpose. He was ready to face whatever darkness awaited them, determined to bring the truth into the light. Tomorrow would be a day of reckoning, a day when they would stand together and reclaim their voices, fighting for their freedom and the future of their town. Chapter 9: Shattering Silence. The day of the public meeting dawned with an air of uncertainty, the storm of the previous night having given way to a fragile calm. The town hall, once a sanctuary for community discussions and celebrations, now stood as a battleground for freedom and truth. As residents filed in, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation and anxiety, a palpable tension hanging over the gathering. Michael and Jessica arrived early, their hearts pounding with determination. The long, wooden tables at the front were arranged in a U-shape, lined with chairs that quickly filled with anxious faces. The echoes of past laughter and shared stories felt like a distant memory, replaced by a weighty silence that pressed down on the room. The citizens of Elmsworth, once full of vibrancy, now wore expressions marked by fear and resolve. As the clock struck 6, Mayor Thompson took his place at the head of the table, his face a mask of stern authority. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice barely rising above a whisper. "We gather here to address the concerns raised by several residents regarding the recent silence that has engulfed our community." Michael felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it, the moment they had prepared for, the time to unearth the truth. He glanced at Jessica, who nodded, her eyes alight with determination. They had gathered evidence, testimonies, and a plan to expose the web of deceit spun by the corporation. As the meeting progressed, residents voiced their concerns, their voices trembling but rising in courage. One by one, they shared their experiences of silence, their fears, frustrations, and the impact of losing their voices. Grace spoke passionately about her children, her voice breaking as she recalled the laughter that once filled her home. "How can we raise our children in a world where they're afraid to speak?" she asked, her words striking a chord with many. Then it was Michael's turn. He rose to his feet, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room upon him. "We're not here just to express our fears," he declared, his voice steady and clear. "We're here to reclaim our voices and demand accountability. The silence we've endured is not just an inconvenience. It's a violation of our rights." He could see the nods of agreement from the crowd, the flicker of hope igniting within them. We have uncovered evidence linking the corporation to a series of unethical experiments conducted right here in Elmsworth, he continued, his pulse quickening as he prepared to unveil the damning information. They have manipulated our lives, our children, and our very voices for their gain. Gasps rippled through the audience, a collective wave of shock and disbelief washing over them. The mayor's face paled, and he shifted uneasily in his seat. "This is a serious accusation," he interjected, his tone defensive. "We have not seen any concrete proof of such claims." But Michael pressed on, undeterred. "We have documents, testimonies, and reports from former employees. These aren't just accusations. They're truths we can no longer ignore. It's time to take a stand against those who wish to silence us." The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. The murmurs of dissent that had once been mere whispers transformed into an uproar of disbelief and outrage. Residents began to shout questions, demanding answers, demanding action. "How could you let this happen?" One man yelled at the mayor. "What do you know about this?" Amidst the chaos, Jessica stood by Michael's side, her presence a reassuring anchor. "We are not alone in this fight," she shouted above the clamor, her voice resonating with strength. "Together, we can reclaim our rights. Together, we can demand transparency." The tension in the room escalated, the walls vibrating with the raw energy of the crowd. Michael felt the surge of community support, a powerful reminder of the strength they possessed when united. "This is not just about Elmsworth," he called out, his words echoing off the walls. "It's about freedom of speech. It's about the power of community. When we come together, we can shatter the chains that bind us." As Michael's speech reached its crescendo, a representative from the corporation, a man in a crisp suit named Mr. Lawson, entered the room. He strolled in with an air of arrogance, his expression one of disdain. "You think you can disrupt our operations with your wild claims?" he sneered, casting a condescending glance over the crowd. "You're all being foolish." At that moment, Michael felt a surge of anger, but also an unyielding sense of resolve. "No more," he declared, raising his hand to silence the room. "No more will we be dismissed or belittled. We are not foolish. We are empowered." A ripple of approval surged through the audience, igniting a fire within them. They began to chant, "We will not be silenced. We will not be silenced." The energy in the room was electric, a force that could not be contained. As the chants echoed off the walls, Michael locked eyes with Jessica, a shared understanding passing between them. They had ignited a spark, and there was no turning back. The confrontation had become a symbol of resistance, a moment that would define their community's fight for justice. The mayor, sensing the tide turning against him, attempted to regain control. "We will investigate these claims," he stated, though his voice trembled under the weight of their demands. "But you must understand that the corporation provides jobs and resources for this town." But Michael pressed on, unyielding. "What good is a job if it comes at the cost of our very voices? What good is a community built on fear?" With each question, the crowd grew bolder, their resolve strengthening as they recognized the truth in Michael's words. They had been silenced for too long, and the time for change was now. The silence that had enveloped them was crumbling, giving way to a chorus of voices that would not be extinguished. As the meeting unfolded, testimonies poured forth, each one a thread in the tapestry of their shared struggle. The revelations were staggering. Stories of manipulation, fear, and oppression began to emerge. Residents recounted chilling encounters with corporate representatives, detailing the lengths they had gone to suppress dissent. Each story deepened the collective resolve of the community, solidifying their unity against a common enemy. The air buzzed with determination, each heartbeat resonating with the promise of change. In that moment, Elmsworth transformed from a town gripped by fear into a beacon of hope and resilience. The shattering of silence had begun, and they were ready to reclaim their voices, their freedom, and their future. As the meeting reached its climax, Michael looked out at the sea of faces, a tapestry of emotions woven together by shared pain and newfound strength. The room pulsed with energy, a collective heartbeat echoing the sentiment of their fight. "We will not allow ourselves to be silenced again," he shouted, his voice rising above the roar of the crowd. "Together, we will bring the truth to light, and we will stand firm against any attempt to control us." And in that moment, something shifted. The fear that had once gripped their hearts began to dissolve, replaced by a fierce determination. They were no longer just individuals lost in the shadows. They had become a community, an unstoppable force ready to confront the darkness that had threatened to consume them. As the meeting drew to a close, the mayor stood in front of the crowd, visibly shaken but aware of the reality that now loomed over him. "We will take your concerns seriously," he announced, though his voice lacked conviction. "I will ensure that an independent investigation is launched. We must work together to find solutions." The murmurs of discontent echoed through the room, but beneath it all was a current of hope. The people of Elmsworth had found their voices, and they were not going to back down. They had come together to face the truth, and no corporation, no authority figure could silence them again. As Michael stepped down from the makeshift podium, he felt an overwhelming sense of relief mixed with a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced their fears, confronted the corporation, and ignited a movement that would reverberate through the town for years to come. Together, they were ready to fight for their freedom, their community, and the future they deserved. The shattering silence had given way to a powerful symphony of voices, united in their quest for justice, and nothing could extinguish the flame they had kindled. Chapter 10: Echoes of Truth. In the days following the explosive confrontation at the town hall, the atmosphere in Elmsworth transformed dramatically. The echoes of the meeting lingered in the air, reverberating through the community as the residents began to pick up the pieces of their lives, emboldened by the truth they had collectively unearthed. The morning sun cast a warm glow over the town, illuminating the familiar streets that had become battlegrounds of silence and oppression. As Michael walked through the town square, he noticed a palpable shift in the energy. There were smiles where once there had been fear, and conversations flowed freely as neighbors engaged in animated discussions about the future of their community. Jessica stood beside him, her hand firmly clasped in his. She radiated a sense of purpose, and the resilience she had found within herself was inspiring. They both carried the weight of their shared struggle, yet it felt lighter now, buoyed by the solidarity of their neighbors. "It's like the town has awoken from a long slumber," she remarked, glancing around at the bustling activity. "People are talking again. They're sharing their stories, and they're not afraid." Michael nodded, his heart swelling with pride for the community they had fought to empower. "It's incredible to see. We've sparked something," he said, feeling a sense of responsibility settle over him. "But we have to keep pushing. This is just the beginning." As they walked, they encountered familiar faces. Grace, who had been one of the first to speak out, was organizing a gathering to discuss the next steps for the community. The excitement was contagious as she recounted her plans for a support network to ensure that residents felt safe voicing their concerns moving forward. "We can't let this momentum fade," she insisted, her enthusiasm infectious. "We need to educate everyone about their rights and hold the corporation accountable for its actions." Michael's resolve strengthened at her words. This was not merely about them anymore. It was about the future of Elmsworth, a future that could only flourish if the community remained united. He and Jessica agreed to help Grace with her initiative, providing resources and connecting residents with legal experts who could help them navigate the complex web of corporate influence that had plagued their town. However, as hope blossomed in the community, a shadow lingered at the edges of their newfound strength. Not everyone had embraced the revelations. Some residents remained skeptical or fearful of repercussions. Whispers of doubt still circulated, cautioning against pushing too hard or drawing attention to their fight. A handful of individuals, either loyal to the corporation or simply paralyzed by fear, were determined to stifle the progress made. Michael and Jessica held an open forum in the town square, inviting residents to share their concerns and ideas. The atmosphere buzzed with energy, but a palpable tension simmered beneath the surface as a few dissenters voiced their worries. What if the corporation retaliates? one elderly man asked, his voice trembling. "We can't afford to lose our jobs or homes. Isn't it better to stay quiet?" As others chimed in, expressing similar anxieties, Jessica stepped forward, her voice steady and resolute. "I understand the fear. I feel it too," she admitted, locking eyes with the crowd. "But silence has already cost us so much. We can't allow fear to dictate our lives any longer. We have to fight for our rights, for the future we want our children to have. We owe it to ourselves and to those who suffered before us." The crowd fell silent, weighing her words, and Michael felt a swell of pride for her bravery. They had faced unimaginable challenges, yet here they were, standing together, ready to confront their fears. As the discussion continued, it became clear that the community was grappling not only with the revelations about the corporation, but also with the broader implications of their fight. Michael shared stories of the history they had uncovered, of government experiments that had been swept under the rug, of lives altered by decisions made in secrecy. "This isn't just about us," he urged. "It's about the very foundation of our democracy. We must ensure that our voices are heard, that we hold those in power accountable for their actions." His impassioned words sparked a renewed commitment among the residents. They began to form committees, organize discussions, and plan protests to demand transparency from the corporation and the local government. There was a sense of urgency, a recognition that their struggle had ignited something much larger than themselves. In the weeks that followed, Michael and Jessica found themselves at the forefront of this movement, advocating for change and helping to guide their neighbors through the complex process of standing up against powerful entities. They met with local officials, lobbied for regulations to protect their community, and forged alliances with activists from neighboring towns who had faced similar struggles. The ripple effect of their actions began to spread, as Elmsworth's story became a beacon of hope for others. Yet amidst the progress, the couple faced personal challenges. The emotional toll of their fight weighed heavily on them, and they often found themselves navigating the delicate balance between their activism and their family life. Michael struggled with sleepless nights, haunted by visions of what could happen if their efforts fell short. Jessica, too, felt the strain as they juggled their responsibilities to their children with the demands of their growing movement. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of meetings and planning, they sat together on the porch of their home, the moon casting a gentle glow over the neighborhood. "Do you think we're making a difference?" Michael asked quietly, vulnerability lacing his words. Jessica took a moment before responding, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I do," she replied, her voice strong yet tender. "Even if it feels overwhelming at times, I believe we're planting seeds for change. The conversations we're having, the awareness we're raising, it matters. But it's going to take time, and we have to be ready for the long haul." As she spoke, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose surging within him. They were not just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for future generations, for the right to live in a community where their voices mattered. And while the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, they were determined to see it through. As the weeks turned into months, the community continued to rise in solidarity. They hosted rallies, initiated petitions, and actively engaged with media outlets, shining a spotlight on the injustices they faced. The echo of their voices grew louder, resonating far beyond the borders of Elmsworth, igniting a movement that demanded accountability and change. However, beneath the surface of this progress, a sense of unease lingered. The corporation, rattled by the newfound activism, began to respond with its own tactics. Representatives visited the town, trying to assuage fears with promises of support and job security. Their reassurances felt hollow to many, a desperate attempt to maintain control over the narrative. In the quiet corners of town, whispers of resistance still stirred. The struggle against oppression was far from over. Residents continued to grapple with their fears, and Michael and Jessica understood that the fight for truth and justice was ongoing. It required vigilance, solidarity, and an unwavering commitment to ensure that their voices remained heard. As the sun set on Elmsworth, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, Michael and Jessica sat together, reflecting on their journey. They understood the road ahead would not be easy, but they were fortified by the knowledge that they were part of something larger, a collective effort to reclaim their community and protect their rights. In that moment, they felt a profound sense of gratitude for their neighbors, their allies, and the lessons they had learned. Together, they would continue to echo the truth, standing firm against the shadows that threatened to silence them once more. And as they looked towards the horizon, the stars began to emerge, shimmering with promise, a reminder that even in darkness, there is light to guide them forward. The struggle may be far from over, but the seeds of hope had been sown, and with each passing day, the echoes of truth grew stronger, resonating throughout Elmsworth and beyond.